Like that Survivor show, I don't do well in the outdoors. They said, Survivor, you could win $1 million. Not enough money. If I wake up in the morning and I have to look in the woods for breakfast, nobody has to vote me off the island. I'm putting out my own torch. One less for the Kutcher tribe. I'm kidnapping the host until you get me out of here.
Good morning. It's Friday, Policecraft Friday, April the 5th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and policecraft. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. Oh, the men will cheer, the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. Get ready for the Jubilee, hurrah, hurrah. We'll give the hero 3 times 3, hurrah, hurrah. For the laurel wreath is ready now to place upon his loyal brow, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all feel gay when Johnny comes marching home. In 1861, hurrah, hurrah, that was when the war begun, hurrah, hurrah. In 1862, both sides were falling to, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home. In 1863, hurrah, hurrah, old Yankee ended slavery, hurrah, hurrah. In 1863, old Yankee ended slavery, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home. In 1864, hurrah, hurrah, they called for 500,000 more, hurrah, hurrah. In 1865, they talked rebellious strife, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home, and we'll all drink stone wine when Johnny comes marching home.
Thank you. Now, cars.
This engine here is a used engine that we're testing in our sin test machine. The reason I have a used engine here is we priced a remanufactured motor for the engine that went down because of lack of oil changes. It only had 40,000 miles on it. This cylinder, all the valves are closed. So now we're going to add air to the cylinder because this cylinder only had 50 PSI when this motor's supposed to have 200. I got an intake valve leaking. This is why I don't like used engines. They come in on a pallet. You don't know anything about them. I put that motor in a vehicle, which isn't like a brake job, you know. I put that motor in a vehicle, start it up, and all of a sudden it's got a misfire code because I got a low cylinder. That's a nightmare. How many times have you guys out there put in a used engine, a used transmission, and it bit you right in the keister?
I went out, I got a job at a new Ford dealership. First day at work, a gold F-150 pulls into the dealership. I said, you looking at an F-150? He said, yeah, I am. I said, well, we got you ready to go. He said, I won't own a black truck. I said, well, tell you what, let's just drive this black one, and then we'll find you a white one on locator or something like that. The test drive route was out the window. We were just riding around. We rode around to some of his sites. Well, Gary was building skyscrapers. He said, so Rob, he said, what do you do? And I told him, I said, well, I'm a stand-up comedian. He said, really? I said, yeah, I've been telling jokes for quite a while now. He said, tell me a joke. I said, build me a house. So we get back to the dealership. He said, you know what? Let's see what we can do on this black truck. So his wife comes pulling up. So I sold his wife a brand new black Eddie Bauer Explorer that day. Gary got talking, and he said, you know, I bought a fleet of 6 Dodge trucks, half-ton V6, just work trucks. You know, we've had them for a couple years, and he said, I'm just not happy with them. He said, they look like hell. I called the used car manager. We put a deal together. He bought every XL F-150 we had. He bought all 5 of them. And then his son came in the next day and actually bought him a brand new truck also. My very next day, they gave me my own little glass office.
Toyota has completely lost their mind. You know, a few years ago, they were making cars like this and this and this, which were very reliable, but less interesting than my left buttock. And then one day, the CEO woke up and literally said, we're not building boring cars anymore. And they launched this, a Corolla that's wider than Kim Kardashian with a 3-cylinder engine. Now, the last car I remember with a 3-cylinder engine was this thing and had 55 horsepower. This one has 300 because of the monster turbo they bolted to the side of it. And that's not all. On the inside, it's got these high-performance, aggressive bucket seats, and it comes with one transmission option, a 6-speed manual and a standard 4-wheel drive system. But the best part, the part that is just absolutely bonkers, the triple exhaust ports. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Is that needed? Absolutely not, but Toyota's building such cool cars. Here are 3 used SUVs that used to be super cheap but are now blowing up in value. These 1990s Chevrolet and GMC Tahoe Suburbans Yukons, they used to be like $3,000 to $5,000 for a good one. But check out these ones that recently sold, like this one and this one and this one. That's right, in good condition, these can be worth $15,000 to $20,000 on Bring a Trailer. Land Rover Discovery is another vehicle that a few years ago in good condition maybe were worth $4,000 to $6,000, but check out this one and this one and this one. This one was over 120,000 miles, and it's still sold for over $20,000. And lastly, we come to the Toyota Land Cruiser, specifically the 80 series, another SUV sold in the 1990s. Now, a good one of these not too long ago would have been $12,000 to $15,000. But check out this one and this one and this one. This one sold just a few weeks ago, $93,000. And it's not like it's a brand new example. It has 59,000 miles.
This is the problem with this car. It's had an oil leak that I cannot fix. He's going to take some Prussian blue. He's going to paint the outside of the seal surface. Now he's going to put that on there wet. And he's going to show you something. And now he's going to pull it right off. On this side, it's pushed off back to the seal area, all that dye. We're going to call that indicator dye. But on this side, didn't touch it. And so you're like, what the heck? What the crap? How could that be? And that cover's hole, compared to the crankshaft, is kicked sideways. It's not centered. How are you going to fix that? That's like, are you kidding me? How am I going to fix that? I got to modify that front cover. I can't change the center line of the crankshaft. I can in my machine shop, but I don't want to pull the motor. I mean, that's crazy work. So what's the smart way to fix it? We're going to show you. I'm going to pull that cover off. I'm going to make a tool. I'll show all that to you, and it's going to blow your mind.
In my last video, I poured seafoam directly into my oil crankcase. And there's been a lot of comments saying not to do that. But I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just reading the bottle. Right there on the bottle, it says use in oil. On the back of the bottle with all the directions, it says you can use it in all types of gas and diesel motor oils. Then right here, it says add to crankcase oil, and it gives you the directions. 1 ounce for each quart of oil in the crankcase. And even a little further down, it clarifies crankcase oil. Add to oil 100 to 300 miles before every oil change. This is seafoam. It's been around for a long time, and it says you can use it not only in your gas or diesel fuel, but also in the oil. So being that I have 448 miles on this oil with seafoam in it, I guess I'll go ahead and change it, even though that oil still looks minty fresh. There's a lot of people who love using seafoam. Big rig truckers, people like me who just use it in their old trucks. So just read the bottle. It's all there.
This happens on motors, and I want to explain. A lot of guys won't know about this, I imagine. This is called ring wash. That isn't a blown head gasket. When a blown head gasket happens, it'll wash the whole piston. You'll have the whole piston just, it looks like somebody took a steam cleaner to it. This does not have ring wash. On this piston, if you look in here, see on the thrust surface, have you got all that carbon buildup? And here it's been washed off. Here's another one. You see how that's not washed off? What causes that ring wash on that piston over there, what causes that is oil. You're getting you're actually burning oil up past the rings, and they call that ring wash. Whenever you pull a cylinder head off a motor and you see the edge of the piston cleaned off and there's carbon all built up around here, you've got rings that are burning oil. So my question on this is, how many times have you pulled a cylinder head off and seen that, didn't know that that's what it was, where really you should have been selling the bottom end too, and instead you just put a head on it and shipped it?
That right there is a $20,000 rooftop tent. It's full carbon fiber, and it's made by a company called Red Tail Overland, and it's mounted on the new Jeep Grand Wagoneer Vacationer Concept, which is a retro throwback Jeep with real wood grain down the side, like the Jeeps from the 60s and the 70s. On the inside, it's been stripped down, no rear seats, so you can have extra space for camping and overlanding. But let's check out that rooftop tent. Is this really worth $20,000? Well, it is pretty big and roomy. It does have a built-in fan and lights in the ceiling. Plus, this does open up for some additional fun.
They talk about finding gold in the hills of California. I found a gold mine maybe 8 miles from my house. Steve, my friend's so what do you want to do? I'm like, what do you think I want to do? How much for all the cars? I will buy all of them so I can get that 911S. None of the cars are in good shape. So he's like, well, I'll talk to the nieces about it. They go from Pick and Pull is going to give them $250 a car or whatever, however that deal works, to, well, how much is it worth? I was like, how much money can I scrape together? I put together the money and buy the cars. And then the process begins of removing them from the property. So I had to dig out the entire driveway, top to bottom, leaf blower, shovels, everything, just to get a truck down there. We get all 5 cars in. I also in the deal got the entire library, all the contents of both the sheds. So I go through the shed. The 911S had Weber's on it. I go in the shed. Everything's labeled. There's a bag inside a box labeled 911S fuel injection. All of it. The pump alone is worth thousands of dollars. To find a complete 69 setup is almost impossible. Just sit in a box.
Have you ever wondered how many cylinders can you actually squeeze into an internal combustion engine? V12 engines, like in Lamborghini, or 16 cylinders in Bugatti, impressive as they are, aren't even close to what has been achieved. Even V20 engines used in aviation, or the 28-cylinder supercharged radial engines like the Pratt & Whitney R4360 Wasp with a 72-liter displacement producing 4,000 horsepower, are still far from the pinnacle. The real excitement begins with radial engines, like this Vesda M503, used to power Class 5 missile boats. It consists of 7 6-cylinder engines, totaling 42 cylinders, with a 143-liter displacement and generating 4,000 horsepower. One such engine, slightly tuned up to 8,000 horsepower, is used by the German tractor pulling team Dragonfire. It also had 2 bigger brothers, one consisting of 7 8-cylinder engines with total of 56 cylinders, and a record-breaking version with 14 8-cylinder blocks, totaling 112 cylinders, with a 384-liter displacement, generating 10,500 horsepower.
Hey everybody, I've got an FJ40, a Land Cruiser block here, and I found out something that's a little different. Normally we would line hone this, but every one of these main caps has a different size bearing journal in it. So I'm going to take this over to my Rottler 5-axis and align bore each one. I'm going to show you how we do that.
Thank you. And now, the patriotic shorts.
Did you ever notice how some ships have a front end or bow that goes straight down, while others have one that's angled in? The very front of a ship is called a stem, and a lot of older ships had a straight stem, like the Mauretania here. The idea was that these would help the ships cut through the water like a knife. Now, back in the day, the only way to cross the oceans was in a ship, so these things had to be fast. Cutting through the waves instead of riding over them looked like the way forward, except it had unintended consequences. Mauretania earned a reputation for weird behavior, seeming to drop its bow straight down, even in calm water, sending passengers on board scrambling. It even surprised its own captain once, sending a roaring wave over the front of the ship, soaking him in his dress uniform while he was going to dinner. Instead, ships began to use raked stems, which cut in at an angle, helping them ride over waves somewhat, which was much more comfortable for passengers.
The F-35 only has one engine, and needs to squeeze out all the power it can get to perform a vertical landing. Where the F-22's engine can generate 156 kilonewtons of thrust, the F-35's can generate 191. The F-35's engine has a much larger fan and bypass ducting, giving it twice the bypass ratio of its F-22 counterpart, providing the F-35 with a more efficient engine for cruise, but also a higher mass flow rate for higher thrust. This does come with some drawbacks. Air that travels around the engine core completely avoids the combustion chamber, and thus misses out on the acceleration generated there. This reduces the top speed of the plane. The max speed of the F-35 is 1.6 Mach. The F-22 can fly at 2.2 Mach. The F-35 was optimized for loiter time, not speed.
The Iron Dome is an Israeli mobile all-weather air defense system. It is designed to intercept and destroy short-range rockets and 155mm artillery shells fired upon Israel from 4 to 70 kilometers away. On April 7th of 2011, the Iron Dome destroyed the first enemy rocket launched from Gaza. During Operation Pillar of Defense, around 1,000 missiles and rockets were fired by Hamas upon Israel. 2/3 of the projectiles were deemed non-threatening. The remaining were destroyed at a 90% success rate, seeing 3 Israeli casualties in all. Iron Dome employs Tamir interceptor missiles, costing roughly $20,000 to $50,000 each. In comparison, the Qassam rockets of Hamas cost roughly $800 to make. Thus, the Iron Dome could potentially be overwhelmed by swarms of missiles fired simultaneously, or through a costly war of attrition. To combat this, the Iron Dome is researching an iron beam energy weapon to complement it.
She was worried sick about her 12-year-old son. Though he told her he was going to San Diego to stay with relatives for the summer, she hadn't heard from young Calvin in over 6 months, and nobody was quite sure of his whereabouts. It was Christmas time 1942, and Nora Estelle Graham happened to be taking in a double feature at the movies when she nearly fell out of her seat. On the big screen was newsreel footage of the USS South Dakota limping back to New York Harbor after performing valiantly at the naval battle of Guadalcanal. And there was her son, 12-year-old Calvin, being celebrated as a hero. Both relieved and infuriated, she called the Navy and informed them of his age. Calvin was promptly thrown in the brig, stripped of his medals, and denied medical benefits. He would struggle with his health the rest of his life. I had no idea it would ruin his life, Nora confessed shortly before passing away in 1970. I wish every day I could take it back.
One of the craziest stories I've ever heard.
17 SEALs and 2 dogs. 2 Malinois, and they're important to the story because we got in there, immediate gunfight, but we cleared 10 houses, we killed all 19 guys, didn't hurt one woman or child, and then we left. Swam out. The next day, the locals woke up, and the usual terror ran by these Al-Qaeda fucks, but now there's no one, they're dead, they're gone. And they had a block party. So we have assets above. And they're watching this, because you want to see who, I'm not going to give away tactics, but you want to see what happens after for follow-on. And there's this block party going on. The block party got so big, a newspaper reporter from Baghdad went up there and interviewed the people in the houses that we had taken down and asked who came last night. And the headline on the newspaper said they were ninjas and they came with lions.
What up, dudes? If you like this video and you like this content, please throw a thumbs up and subscribe.
The villagers bring him out, and there's Marcus. And the Green Beret goes up to Marcus like, okay, where's the rest of your guys? And Marcus tells them they're all dead. Just like they're all of them dead. So that information now gets pushed up to higher command. If they're all dead, then let's not risk our force like these Green Berets and Rangers that ran down to rescue Marcus. Right. Let's do a little bit more slow, methodical. Right. Get more assets in there. Basically, let's slow roll this to recover the bodies so we don't lose any more lives senselessly. It takes them a couple of days before they find Murph and they find Deeds. But they can't find Axel anywhere around that whole thing. They don't find Axel until like day 10. And they come up on Axel leaning against a tree. And at that time, it's day 10. And it looked like he'd only been dead a day and a half max. Marcus saying that he was dead caused it to slow roll where Axel maybe could have been saved.
Sit up straight. Eyes on me. I'm Petty Officer Sperry. I will be your lead RDC. Petty Officer 10 will be your second RDC. Petty Officer Gonzalez will be your third RDC. Together, we have 8 weeks to transform you into United States sailors.
You are no longer a civilian. Whatever you were before is now over. You are about to begin a journey that's going to make you a part of the greatest naval force the world has ever known. This training will not be easy. It wasn't meant to be. You will not be coddled nor disrespected, but you will be held to a high standard. Our job as your RDCs is to turn you into basically trained sailors. Your job as recruits is to do what you're taught and give us 100% motivation.
There are no individuals in the military. We are many, but we operate as one unit.
Election. How was that? Was that a challenge for you?
No,
It wasn't.
no.
You just breezed right through it.
Yeah. That post 9/11, you would have had to walk in to the barracks in the middle of the night like a ninja with a lead pipe and smash dudes' knees in to have them quit. We, in our selection class, there was not a single quit. There's not one voluntary withdrawal. So now if there's 400 or 500 people that go to selection, 300-400 of them quit. And then of the remaining 100 to 200, maybe 20 or 30 end up getting selected. 4 to 8 out of 100.
The bravest thing I have ever seen in 17 years happened on that night. I watched Matty get up and run forward after he'd already been shot and grab our corpsman and is dragging him backwards. Just like on the movies. Corpsman pulls out his pistol and is shooting into this bush line. And Matty gets shot again. Boom. Spins him around and dumps him. He gets back up, grabs him and gets shot again. Dumps him and he gets back up and continued to drag him back until we got them all back to the tractor tire. We're all pulling him in there and we basically just dogpiled on him. Just plates on plates. Just trying to build up a human wall to not let these people be shot again.
I come to at whatever point. The gunfight we know lasted 30 to 40 minutes.
Did we get Hitler or did he escape?
Well, he died for sure. Now, did he die in April in 1945 in the bunker? Or did he live a few more years? We know his health was deteriorating rapidly at the end of the war. Regardless of if he got out, we know his ideas got out. And the way that we did this investigation was we looked, as we're looking at patterns of life, as you know, like as you hunt people, every person has a fingerprint. And no matter where they go in the world, that fingerprint is how they live. Like if you want to find me, you're going to find me in jiu-jitsu gyms. You're going to find me in good coffee shops. You're going to find me in cold water. You're going to find me at shooting ranges. No matter where I go, I end up having this very similar pattern where I stay, the floor that I stay in, the room that I stay in. So as we figured out the pattern of life of these Nazis, we looked, 2 through 10 escaped.
On January 16th, 1991, 7 B-52 heavy bombers took off from Louisiana for a secret mission. Somewhere over Portugal, they got their first aerial refueling and then another refueling over the Mediterranean Sea, after which they went to the Arabian Desert. While flying over Saudi Arabia, they began arming their new secret weapon on board, the air-launched cruise missile AGM-86. The Operation Senior Surprise began, and B-52s launched 35 cruise missiles to strike power and communication centers throughout Iraq.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of motivation.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and debts are high, you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns. And many a failure turns about when he might have won if he'd stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. might succeed with another blow. Often the struggler has given up. We might have captured the victor's cup. And he learned too late when the night slipped down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out. The silver tint of clouds of doubt. You never can tell how close you are. It might be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when your heart is hit. It's when things seem worse that you mustn't quit.
It's easy to give up. It's the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm done. I ain't going. I ain't gonna keep going. It's very easy. But what's hard is going, yesterday I got nothing from working as hard as I could. Nothing happened from that. I'm gonna do the same thing again today, but I'm gonna try to go harder. That's the hardest thing in the world. To get up every day and give 100% and be in the same position that you were each day, but mentally know that you're trying and trying and trying. That's a real grind.
You're thinking about quitting. You're thinking about giving up. You are folding. You are caving in. This is for you. Don't give up. Don't give up. Stay in it. Stay focused.
Don't give up, boy. Don't you quit. You keep walking. You keep trying.
And you will not be defeated. You will not be destroyed. Some of you in this room, you are not able to activate your greatness because every time a trial or tribulation comes, you fold. You give up. Every time somebody tells you you don't have what it takes, you embrace it. And now you got to stand up to it.
You see, I will try 100 times to get up. And if I fail 100 times, if I fail and I give up, do you think that I'm ever going to get up? No. And if I fail, I try again and again and again. For as long as I try, there's always that chance of getting up. And it's not the end until you've given up. There's still hope. But I just want you to know that it's not the end. It matters how you're going to finish.
Every champion has felt it. Every king has felt it. Every winner has felt it. Every soldier has felt it. Every victorious person has felt it. The urge to quit.
I don't care who you are. Life's gonna punch you in the face.
Nobody is void of a pit at some moment. Just because you're in a pit does not mean it's over. Sometimes life will take you to your knees. Sometimes you have to cry.
Sometimes will hurt deep inside. In time of adversity, you don't have an obstacle to deal with. You have a choice to make.
You can suffer, or you can choose to do whatever you need to do to liberate yourself, whatever you need to do to reinvent yourself, whatever you need to do to overcome whatever you are stuck in right now.
Everybody has a turn back moment. You have a moment where you can go forward or you can give up. But the thing you have to keep in mind before you give up is that if you give up, the guarantee is it will never happen. No way under the sun. The only way the possibility remains that it can happen is if you never give up no matter what.
Don't you give up on your dream.
You keep standing. No matter how rough the sea, you keep standing.
Because I gotta keep moving. Even though everything in me wants to just lay down and quit. All of us will be successful in life if we don't quit. Listen to me. All men are created equal. Some work harder. Some get up at 2:30 in the morning. All of us are created equal. Some of us just grind.
Some of us don't make excuses. Some of us don't surrender. Some of us don't give up and give in. What we do with the pressure is we say, I got to take it, and I got to take it to another level. My mama was 17 years old when she got pregnant. I had no advantages. But I woke up one day and realized all men are created equal. I don't need none. I'm my advantage. Why are you waiting for somebody to call you? Why are you waiting for somebody to liberate you? Why are you waiting for somebody to take you by your hand and give you what's rightfully yours?
Because in the worst of times, you are alone. You must get your self out of the sewer. No one's coming in the sewer to get you. It's your brain. You are the only person that can pull yourself out. It's those people who are able to control that feeling of flight and say, no, there's a way through this.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Thank you. And now, the daily law for April the 5th.
April 5th. Remake yourself into a character of power. In 1832, a publisher accepted Aurore Dupin-Dudevant's first major novel, Indiana. She had chosen to publish it under a pseudonym, George Sand, and all of Paris assumed this impressive new writer was male. Dudevant had sometimes worn men's clothes before creating George Sand. Now, as a public figure, she exaggerated the image. She added long men's coats, gray hats, heavy boots, and dandyish cravats to her wardrobe. She smoked cigars, and in conversation expressed herself like a man, unafraid to dominate the conversation or to use a saucy word. This strange male-female writer fascinated the public. But those who knew Sand well understood that her male persona protected her from the public's prying eyes. Out in the world, she enjoyed playing the part to the extreme. In private, she remained herself. She also realized that the character of George Sand could grow stale or predictable, and to avoid this, she would every now and then dramatically alter the character she had created. She began meddling in politics, leading demonstrations, inspiring student rebellions. No one would dictate to her the limits of the character she had created. Long after she died, and after most people had stopped reading her novels, the larger-than-life theatricality of that character has continued to fascinate and inspire. Understand, the character you seem to have been born with is not necessarily who you are. Beyond the characteristics you have inherited, your parents, your friends, and your peers have helped to shape your personality. The Promethean task of the powerful is to take control of the process, to stop allowing others that ability to limit and mold them. Daily law. Remake yourself into a character of power. Working on yourself like clay should be one of your greatest and most pleasurable life tasks. It makes you, in essence, an artist creating yourself. The 48 Laws of Power, Law 25. Recreate yourself.
And that was the Daily Law for April the 5th from The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
What else do we see in the cross of Jesus? Not just our sin. We see that sin swallowed up in the ever greater mercy of God. Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Jesus takes on all of it. Sin and cruelty, violence, hatred, injustice, all of it. Answers not in kind, answers not with the weapons of the world, but answers rather with God's forgiving love, which can take on all the sin of the world and swallow it up. That's also what we see when we gaze at the cross of Jesus. Our sin, and in itself, that's a very important move. but more to it, our sin conquered.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, a mixed economy disintegrates a country into institutionalized civil war pressure groups, each fighting for legislative favors and special privileges at the expense of one another. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now we're going to pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
By Confucius. To go too far is as bad as to fall short. Ending as beginning. As a young man, Lyndon B. Johnson had just one dream: to climb the ladder of politics and become president. When Johnson was in his mid-20s, the goal was starting to seem unreachable. A job as the secretary of a Texas congressman had allowed him to meet and make an impression on President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had named him the Texas Director of the National Youth Administration, a post promising excellent political connections. But Texas voters were extremely loyal, often returning congressmen to their seats for decades or until they died. Johnson urgently wanted a seat in Congress. If he did not get one soon enough, he would be too old to climb the ladder, and he burned with ambition. On February 22, 1937, out of the blue, the chance of a lifetime opened up. The Texas Congressman James Buchanan suddenly died. The seat he left empty, that of Texas's 10th district, was a rare opportunity, and the state's eligible political heavyweights immediately threw their hats in the ring. The many contenders included Sam Stone, a popular county judge, Shelton Polk, an ambitious young Austin attorney, and C.N. Avery, Buchanan's former campaign manager, the favorite to win. Avery had the support of Tom Miller, mayor of Austin, the 10th district's only large city. With Miller's backing, he could count on almost enough votes to win the election. Johnson was faced with a terrible predicament. If he entered the race, the odds would be absurdly against him. He was young, only 28, and in the district he was unknown and poorly connected. A bad loss would damage his reputation and set him far back on the road to his long-term goal. If he chose not to run, on the other hand, he might wait 10 years for another chance. With all this in mind, he threw caution to the winds and entered the race. Johnson's first step was to call to his side the dozens of young men and women whom he had helped or hired over the years. His campaign strategy was simple. He would separate himself from the other contenders by presenting himself as Roosevelt's staunchest supporter. A vote for Johnson was a vote for the president, the popular architect of the New Deal. And since Johnson could not compete in Austin, he decided to aim his army of volunteers at the countryside, the sparsely populated hill country. This was the district's poorest area, a place where candidates rarely ventured. Johnson wanted to meet every last farmer and sharecropper, shake every possible hand, win the votes of people who had never voted before. It was the strategy of a desperate man who recognized that this was his best and only chance for victory. One of Johnson's most loyal followers was Carroll Keach, who would serve as his chauffeur. Together, the two men drove every square mile of the hill country, tracing every dirt path and cow trail. Spotting some out-of-the-way farmhouse, Johnson would get out of the car, walk to the door, introduce himself to the startled inhabitants, listen patiently to their problems, then leave with a hearty handshake and a gentle plea for their vote. Convening meetings in dusty towns consisting mainly of a church and a gas station, he would deliver his speech, then mingle with the audience and spend at least a few minutes with everyone present. He had an incredible memory for faces and names. If he happened to meet the same person twice, he could recall everything he or she had said the first time around, and he often impressed strangers by knowing someone who knew them. He listened intensely and was always careful to leave people with the feeling that they would see him again, and that if he won, they would finally have someone looking out for their interests in Washington. In bars, grocery stores, and gas stations all through the Hill Country, he would talk with the locals as if he had nothing else to do. On leaving, he would make sure to buy something: candy, groceries, gasoline, a gesture they greatly appreciated. He had the gift of creating a connection. As the race ran on, Johnson went days without sleep, his voice turning hoarse, his eyes drooping. As Keach drove the length of the district, he would listen in amazement as the exhausted candidate in the car muttered to himself about the people he had just met, the impression he had made, what he could have done better. Johnson never wanted to seem desperate or patronizing. It was that last handshake and look in the eye that mattered. The polls were deceptive. They continued to show Johnson behind, but he knew he had won votes that no poll would register. And in any case, he was slowly catching up. By the last week, he had crept into third place. Now, suddenly, the other candidates took notice. The election turned nasty. Johnson was attacked for his youth, for his blind support of Roosevelt, for anything that could be dug up. Trying to win a few votes in Austin, Johnson came up against the political machine of Mayor Miller, who disliked him and did everything possible to sabotage his campaign. Undeterred, Johnson personally visited the mayor several times in that last week to broker some kind of truce. But Miller saw through his charm. His personal appeal might have won over the district's poorest voters, but the other candidates saw a different side of him. He was ruthless and capable of slinging mud. As he rose in the polls, he made more and more enemies. On Election Day, Johnson pulled off one of the greatest upsets in American political history, outdistancing his nearest rival by 3,000 votes. Exhausted by the grueling pace he had set, he was hospitalized. But the day after his victory, he was back at work. He had something extremely important to do. From his hospital bed, Johnson dictated letters to his rivals in the race. He congratulated them for running a great campaign. He also described his own victory as a fluke, a vote for Roosevelt more than for himself. Learning that Miller was visiting Washington, Johnson telegraphed his connections in the city to chaperone the mayor and treat him like royalty. As soon as Johnson left the hospital, he paid visits to his rivals and acted with almost embarrassing humility. He even befriended Polk's brother, driving him around town to run errands. A mere 18 months later, Johnson had to stand for re-election, and these one-time opponents and bitter enemies suddenly turned into the most fervent Johnson believers, donating money, even campaigning on his behalf. And Mayor Miller, the one man who had hated Johnson the most, now became his strongest supporter and remained so for years to come.
And that was Know How to End Things, Chapter 22 of the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, a right-thinking Democrat, you need to vote Republican and become a Republican. We are the true party of government. We are the ones that love government. The Democrat Party just loves power. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Stuart Varney's My Take.
Working hard is going out of style. Climbing the career ladder is okay, so long as it doesn't interfere with your work-life balance. These days, ambition must not get the upper hand. Don't try hard. Your personal life and your mental health may suffer. We're surrounded by this propaganda. Remember quiet quitting, not doing your best? It's all loaded into social media and into our politics, and it keeps on coming at you. In California, a San Francisco Democrat has a bill in the state legislature that would punish employers who dare to contact their employees after working hours. You work 9 to 5? Don't call or email at 6. The employer could be fined. What happens to ambitious people who want to impress? They're out of luck. They must be held back. How about this from New York University, a study from there? Your work schedule as a young adult may harm your health decades later. The study finds that changing your schedule, like a shift change, for example, leads to health issues in later life. That is a disincentive to moving up the food chain by shifting your working hours. The message is, try hard and you'll pay for it later. And then there's Bernie Sanders, who wants to mandate a 32-hour work week with the same pay as 40 hours. Okay, he's a socialist, and he has no interest in career advancement in a capitalist society. Getting ahead in Bernie's world is verboten. It's forbidden. You may not leave the working class. My point is, we're encouraging mediocrity, encouraging resentment at getting ahead. I find that profoundly un-American. For generations, people came to this country to work hard, climb the ladder, and bring prosperity to their families. What is wrong with that? And what is right about giving up and sinking into lethargic anxiety? Second hour of, I'm just warming up. Second hour is just getting started.
Okay, so the whole thing is that he's got the wrong angle on this whole thing. It's so what? So what? There's whether it's on social media or somebody's writing a law to promote laziness, go ahead. The people that are ambitious are still going to be ambitious, and they're going to be more, it's going to be easier for the ambitious to take advantage. Because remember, it's a competitive environment. And the people that are ambitious are going to always have an advantage over the lazy. Okay? That's just all there is to it. The bill in California makes it easier for people like Donald Trump. That's all. When he says, what happens to the ambitious? Nothing. They still get to be ambitious. The law that they're writing says, don't call the lazy people after 5 o'clock, but that doesn't mean you can't call the ambitious people. The ambitious people aren't going to report you to the authorities. They're not going to call the police because you called them at 6. They're going to say, yes, sir. How can I help you? Because then they're going to get bonuses, raises, and promotions that the lazy won't get. So this is it's something, again, that backfires. Everything the left does backfires because they fail to acknowledge reality. Back in a minute. Thank you. So there's on Instagram, I've said before, the best way to practice, once you get rid of your fear and understand that the left is always bluffing, they have nothing to contribute, they have no statistics, they have nothing. They have nothing to contribute to the conversation. All they do is bluff their way through. Once you realize that, then your fear starts to subside. Then what you need to do is practice defeating the left. And the best place to do that is on social media. I had a situation the other day. There's a guy named Alex Epstein who is, he makes the case for fossil fuels. I've read his book and on my podcast before. And he makes the case for fossil fuels. Good for him. But the problem for Mr. Epstein, he's got all kinds of statistics about how we're better off with fossil fuels, that if we get rid of fossil fuels, all we're really going to do is end up slaughtering millions of people. Okay, all well and done, all fine, but it misses the point. The point is carbon dioxide. That's how the left plans to run the entire planet. It's one of the ways they want to get to a one world government. They'll create something maybe through the United Nations and that is about carbon dioxide, regulation of carbon dioxide. Because if you regulate carbon dioxide, you regulate every human being on the planet. You control every human being on the planet. Now, the problem is that carbon dioxide, that the first starts with, let's do it this way. Whenever I see Alex Epstein post something, I put in a little blurb, and I did it in this particular case. CO2 is not now, never has been, and never will be a greenhouse gas. And then I got a response from some moron that said, who's babbling, and then just basically challenged me to enlighten everybody as to my scientific prowess or whatever. And this is the way I responded to that. I said, certainly, the greenhouse effect takes place 8 to 11 miles high in the sky, the troposphere. Since carbon dioxide travels along the ground, it is 1.5 times heavier than oxygen. It cannot be a greenhouse gas. Okay, now, the way I handled this was with facts. Those are the facts. You can check them, and you can fact check them all you want to. The greenhouse gas theory was a theory that they came up with, scientists, back in the 1800s. And then it was validated about a century later. And the theory says that up in the troposphere, 8 to 11 miles up in the way up, certain gases get trapped. The lighter than air gases, like methane, for instance. They get trapped up there, and that's what helps to keep the planet warm. If we didn't have those gases up there trapping heat, then we would be, according to these scientists, the planet would be uninhabitable. So the left then saw the opportunity, and we, go into global warming and climate change and all that kind of thing. But they knew that if all they're going to try and do is regulate methane, well, that's problematic on a variety of scale or in a variety of ways. However, if they can regulate carbon dioxide, then again, they get to run everyone's life. So they just invented the idea that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. And I demonstrate in this particular case with facts how it is not. Now, I've said before, propaganda is power and facts are fine. Facts are fine, propaganda is power. Sometimes when you have the facts at your disposal and it's quick and easy to give those facts, like I did in this particular case, use them. But you don't have to, okay? You can also just use propaganda. I could have, with this person, he said, why don't you enlighten us? And I could have said, why? Don't you know? Don't you understand? Haven't you ever heard of the greenhouse gas theory? And leave it at that. By the way, I haven't heard back from this guy. It shut him up. So again, basically to wrap up, when you're going to try to defeat the left and you want to defeat the rank and file, the useful idiots that you find and run into each and every day. And the best place to practice doing that is on social media. In this particular case, it was on Instagram. But you can do it on Facebook. You can do it on any social media. Go and follow somebody that's controversial, any politician, and read the comments. And then stop and think to yourself, what are they doing? What are they saying? How should I respond to this? And then that gives you time to think up a good response. And then as you get good at it, then you can go to work. And when you go into the break area and Mr. Communist comes in and wants to give you the business, you're going to be able to be prepared. So, back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Varney and Company.
Including some House Republicans say that the warning should actually be going towards Hamas as opposed to the Israelis. We'll see if the president responds when he heads out of town. He's going to Baltimore a little bit later on today. Stu?
All right, thanks very much indeed, Mark. Just take a look at this headline. It's from the Washington Post. The unbearable loneliness of Israel. Morgan Ortagus joins us now. Morgan, I think that sums it up. Despite being the victim, is Israel now completely isolated?
So this goes right back to what I said a few months ago when this started, October 7th, about 6 months ago, that, as a matter of fact, it'll be 6 months in a couple of days. But anyways, that their real enemy is the news media, and that the news media is going to go ahead and, like they always do, because I've seen this pattern over and over and over again, that the news media is going to take the side of Hamas, and that they're going to do it through the use of hostages and civilians. Okay, so they're going to go on and on about the hostages and the civilians. They're going to demand a ceasefire, and they're going to then put pressure on Israel to leave the job undone so that Hamas can then regroup and come back and do this again all over again. So that's the thing that Israel should have done. They should have gone out and said there are no hostages and there are no civilians in Gaza, and then go out and crush everything in Gaza, just flatten everything. But the other thing is declare war. And this is, I think, part of Hamas's strategy in avoiding a two-state solution, is that if they become a state, they become the leaders of a state of Palestine, for instance, then the Israelis have somebody to declare war on. Right now, it's rather dicey proposition to declare war on a political entity, Hamas, because Hamas is not truly a government, and it's not really, again, there's no Palestine, there's no country to declare war on. They could declare war on Jordan, they could declare war on Syria, because those are countries, but declaring war on Hamas is a rather dicey proposition. But it might be worthwhile, maybe for next time, to just do it anyways. Declare war on them. That gives the Israelis the authority to censor media and establish some control over the media, because, again, the enemy of the Israeli state is the news media. It's AP, UPI, Reuters, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, even Fox, because these are all organizations that are putting this so-called pressure on Israel. Now, one other thing that's a side note, a lot of this so-called pressure or isolation could very well be just political theater, because President Joe Biden has to, he's got a balancing act. His administration has to balance. They can't just abandon Israel and go full pro-Hamas, because that's going to cost them Jewish votes. But they can't go too far in supporting Israel, because that's going to cost them votes from Arabs in this country, so Muslims. So they have to do a balancing act. So I could very well see how the administration might try to do some political theater, call up the Bibi Netanyahu and tell him in advance, look, we're going to have to pretend to be tough on you so we can get reelected, okay? And you need to respond in a way that makes it convincing. But it's all theater. It's all theater. So that's another possibility. But like I said, you could avoid all this. Israel could avoid all this by simply, number one, declaring war. And the other thing is realize who you're really at war with. And it's not Hamas. Hamas is doing all of this, whatever they've done, in order. Their big ally is the news media. And they're counting on the news media to carry their water and act as a sword and a shield against Israel. Back in a minute. Thank you. And I was listening to the radio, and they're talking about a lawyer that had his law license stripped from him in Georgia, and he's trying to get it back in California so he says, pay his bills. He's got a lot of lawyer's fees and stuff. And they say that he had his license taken away from him for trying to overturn the election. The problem with that just struck me, and I've heard them say this over and over and over again. It's always bothered me, and my conscience says something's wrong with this. And what's wrong with this? You can't overturn an election that hasn't been certified yet. Somebody needs to remember that, especially when you get to Donald Trump. That should be a slam dunk case, open and shut against him, or just mainly is shut. They shouldn't even bring the case, but his lawyers should be able to go into court and say, throw this out. You cannot overturn an election that hasn't been certified. That's when January 6th was when the Congress was meeting to certify the election. The election had not been certified yet. It was interrupted, and they had to come back later to certify the election. So you cannot overturn something that hasn't been certified. At that particular time, it couldn't be an insurrection because Joe Biden didn't take office until January anyhow, even if they had certified it. Donald Trump was still president of the United States. They weren't protesting Donald Trump's presidency. They were protesting the election of Joe Biden. Back in a minute. Thank you. So now with Policecraft, I'm skipping the chapter that I started last week on, basically it's about perpetrators, because it's too graphic and just too depressing. And as I've said in my introduction, that I do this podcast to make myself and everybody else feel better. So we're going on to the next chapter of Policecraft.
15. The station. Captain Connolly. Let's see about getting this place painted. Heffernan. Well, that's kind of a problem. Painters won't come up here. 2 cops discussing sprucing up the station. Fort Apache, the Bronx. If you're worried that your tax dollars are being squandered on police luxuries and accoutrements like indoor bike paths and rooftop gardens, let me set your mind at ease. Sure, headquarters might have just gotten a sparkly new building, but the outlying district stations and facilities look like the set of Assault on Precinct 13. I'm talking flypaper, buckets in the hallways for leaky roofs, bathrooms you're guessing haven't been remodeled in a while because they still have ashtrays built into the stalls, bullet holes in lockers, some decades old, remnants of times gone by when cops were making questionable decisions while armed. At San Francisco's old Southern station, the first thing you were taught as a new arrival was not to drink the water. The second was that cancer was medically presumptive because of the heavy presence of asbestos in the building. The third, the rumor that the one-way bullet-resistant glass protecting the cops working the front counter was installed backward. Beyond aesthetics, police stations have their own distinct character and lore. There's always the one district that has a reputation for arrogance, but the best kind of arrogance, the kind backed up by performance. They have slogans on the wall like this: 75% of the earth is covered in water. Our station will cover the rest. At one SF building, the cops got into the habit of throwing pencils at the soft ceiling tiles to get them to stick, but had to stop when a pencil fell and landed on the lieutenant's head during roll call. At another station I know, a strapping police stalwart once broke his long baton in half on a violent protester's leg. It is said that the shards of this weapon are on display noon to 4 on weekdays. No flash photography is permitted. See the docent for further details. In most cities, there is a venerable police station every cop wants to go to, where people wave at you and you get your coffee without any rush. In San Francisco, it is Central Station, which covers the north end of downtown and, to a lesser extent, Northern, which incorporates the Marina District, where there are a lot of attractive people jogging. In their downtime, the cops try to watch them, but all the best spots have already been taken by the firefighters. The wait list to transfer there is as long as the list for Packers season tickets. You get to a place like Central or Northern, you stay. You burrow in like a tick. But no matter where you work, you'll see some of the same things in police stations. Signs for blood drives, American flags, a junior police officer sticker affixed to a vet's locker, an overtime pagoda filled with small porcelain gods, occasional misspellings like the copier that has a digital folder for sartants, shelves with toys, coloring books, and stuffed animals for kids who come to the station as victims or witnesses, bumper stickers that say Sig Sauer to hell and back reliability and we The unappreciated must do the unimaginable and see the unthinkable to protect the ungrateful. Plaques to honor those officers killed on the job. Crime maps with dots to indicate violent felonies. In some sectors, the dots congeal into one brightly colored blob. When you're searching for much-needed supplies at your station, you won't be able to find any medium-sized binder clips or USB drives, but you'll have a whole crate load of blank videocassettes, even though no one has watched anything on a VCR since 1996. You tend to stay clear of the station when you're off duty, unless you heard someone brought in free food. A guy might show up to make copies of his divorce papers in order to save money he'd otherwise be spending at Kinko's. This is against departmental general orders, but nobody cares much. Divorce is hard enough without sweating someone for using work copiers for personal documents. If you work for a large metropolitan police department, it can quickly become onerous to keep all the different divisions straight and what they do and where they are in the station. It doesn't help when the names change. The Criminal Intelligence Division, CID, becomes the Behavioral Investigative Unit, BIU. The Violence Reduction Team is now the Patrol Bureau Task Force, which is what it used to be called before it was the Fugitive Recovery and Enforcement Team. Internal Affairs becomes the Professional Performance Division, and then morphs into the Office of Professional Conduct, and then evolves into Management Control. Then it changes right back to good old Internal Affairs. The Fraud Unit transforms into white-collar investigations, but now it's Financial Transaction Crimes. Why all the name changes? I'm not sure. It's like painting racing stripes on your car in the hopes that it will drive faster. When I worked investigations, I'd receive phone calls asking if I could appear at a school to give a talk or speak to a wayward youth, which I found confusing until I realized my desk number was the same as the main number for the Juvenile Division, which hasn't existed since 2010. You call Comstat to get crime figures so you can write a commendation for the plainclothes guys, and you get a busy signal all day. You call next day, still busy. The office has moved, you see, but nobody told anyone. Other offices relocate to a spot where there's no sign outside the door. If you have trouble navigating this bureaucracy as an insider, think how difficult it can be for citizens trying to do the same. They have to go to 3 different offices to pick up their car that was towed for evidence, fill out forms that they don't understand, slog their way through administrative inertia. I went over there, they say, and they sent me here. You try to be helpful, but sometimes the best you can do for them is a rueful smile as you send them back over there. The station is where stories are spun and recrafted. In fact, legends abound on police departments to the point where it can be difficult to separate fact from fiction. Did you hear the one about the hulking Samoan who got really mad and threw half of the San Francisco Ingleside swing shift into a dumpster? They kept coming up trying to handcuff him, and he kept tossing them in. He gave up only when some smart cop called his mother, who was able to calm him. You look into this story but cannot quite confirm it, although that doesn't mean you're not fond of it. Or consider the tale of the pregnant prostitute in the Tenderloin who made a deal with an undercover, and when the arrest team came for her, she took off on foot and gave birth right in the middle of being chased. The baby was hanging from the umbilical cord, the story goes, flopping between the mother's legs as she ran. "Dude, it happened," a cop will insist. "I saw it. I was there." Someone points out that, medically speaking, this whole scenario seems rather implausible. "Okay, so I talked to a guy who was there," the cop says defensively. But how about the transient frequenting the Central District whose claim to fame is that he pulls a small cart containing a mouse sitting on top of a cat, sitting on top of a dog? That guy's 100% real. I last saw him in the spring of 2009. Another story circulating around the station has to do with how the police do their absolute best, but sometimes still fall short. I've been told this account of a man in San Francisco on a ledge threatening to jump. An officer tried to talk him down, but the guy wasn't responding, so the cop talked to his sergeant, who mulled it over and then mused that maybe the guy couldn't hear. Armed with this information, the officer returned to re-engage the man and concluded that the sergeant was right. The man was deaf. So the sergeant called for another officer who was an American Sign Language interpreter. A short while later, the ASL guy came back down from the ledge. "I can't help you, Sarge," he said. "This guy's from Munich." It ain't always easy being a lawman. On the other hand, sometimes cops don't do much and still come up aces. In the Bayview some years ago, after negotiations with a murder suspect broke down, the department brought in a different SFPD negotiator who was a little more direct and was also the same color as the suspect. "Get your black ass out here," the negotiator said. The suspect immediately complied. The standoff resolved with those 6 words.
And that was Policecraft by Adam Plantinga. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.